All right, so this week in transition math, we're going to be talking about real world fractions and decimals. And again, our mission, as stated here, is I can utilize my understanding of fractions and decimals and apply it to solve real world problems. So, one of the first lessons you're going to have 3 lessons again, like you did last week. But the first lesson you're going to have is actually going to be talking about number lines. And number lines are really useful to understand, especially, for example, if you're in a nursing field where that you need to give a patient so many milliliters of medicine. We definitely want to make sure that you know how to do that and what that really means. In construction, you may need to read a measuring tape or some other kind of measuring device. And so you need to understand number lines, especially if they do not have intermediate readings. And I'll kind of explain to you what I mean by that. So let's walk through one example here. We'll only do one example of these because they're not really that difficult. And again, I'm going to say I've got the number 5 here, and then the number 6, and then the number 7, and you kind of get the idea. All right. So I'm going to say that I have a point right here on this number line. Okay. So the question becomes, what is the value of that point? Well, again, there's no intermediate readings here for you to kind of understand what you really have. Okay. But I know I'm between 6 and 7 on my whole numbers, and I'm somewhere in between there. It doesn't quite look like the middle, maybe or maybe not, but I know I've at least got 6 whole numbers. So I'll go ahead and put 6. Now let's think about then, okay, how many, and I'm going to call them tick marks for lack of a better term. That may be the official name, who knows. But if I start at the number 6, and I'm actually going to use a different color here, and I move to each one, look how many times I move. I have 1 jump there. I have 2 jumps there, 3 jumps there, 4 there, and 5 before I get to another whole number. And then it kind of starts over again, right? So you keep going and you kind of get the idea. You've got 1, 2, 3, etc. So in between each one of these numbers, I have 5 jumps before I get to the next number. So one way that we could say that is my point that I have right here, right, is I have to make 2 jumps out of a total of 5 jumps. Okay. So another way that we could rewrite this 6, it'd be 6 whole units, but it'd be 6 and 2/5. Okay. So again, another way that you could think about that, again, it is still 6 whole units, but then what is 2/5 as a decimal? So think about this, 2 over 5, and decimals are based on 100. So how many times will 5 go into 100? Well, 5 will go into 100 20 times. 20 times 2 is 40. So 2/5 is the same thing as 40 hundredths. 40 hundredths. So think about that. When I write that as a decimal, this would be the same thing as 40 hundredths. Okay. So 6.40 or 6.4. Okay. So kind of get the idea that again, how this could be useful in measurement. If you're using a measuring tape, usually that's in inches. Well, you need to understand what all of those little tick marks really mean, so that you can accurately, for example, if somebody says, "Hey, I need you to cut me a board at 6 3/8." Well, I need to understand where 6 3/8 is. Okay, so that I know exactly where to cut that board at. So you can see how understanding a number line can really help you when you transition into the real world. So that's going to be what your first lesson is all about. The second lesson is going to be about estimating solutions. Now, I'm going to go ahead and tell you up front, I'm not a real big fan of estimating, yet it really does come in handy when you need a quick response. You need answers in a moment's notice. For example, somebody wants you to quote something and they want it quoted right now, like quoted on the spot. Well, it comes really in handy to be able to do mental math and to estimate solutions. So I'm going to kind of talk through an example, and we'll write down the necessary information. I'll give you, kind of tell you how this is going to work out. So let's imagine Susie. Susie has a part-time job, and she makes somewhere between 51.83 and 57.14 per day. Okay, we're just kind of making up these numbers. She makes somewhere between 51.83 and 57.14 every day. So it depends on maybe how long she works or whatever the case may be. So now your question is, what is a reasonable amount of her salary, or what she's going to make over the course of 7 days? Okay. So she works every day, and this is the range that she makes between every day. So in 7 days, how much is she going to make? Okay, I'm going to give you some answer choices. So let's say A is $266, B is $406, C is, let me move this down just a little bit, C is $336, and D is $546. So again, if I try to figure this out, I'm going to try to take 51.83 times 7, 57.14 times 7, and I got to try to figure out whether I'm even close with any of these numbers. Okay, this is 406. So it is really difficult to try to do that on the spot. So one of the things you can do is just kind of round this up. Okay, so let's think about these numbers being rounded. And so think about 51.83. I could round that up to the whole dollar and make that 52. And then this 57.14, that's just a little bit over 57. So we'll just call that 57. Well, again, 52 times 7, I probably don't really know what that is. It's going to be a little bit, even so, more difficult to try to figure out. So let's round it even further. Let's just round it to the tenths digit. So instead of 52, let's just say 50. And instead of 57, that's closer to 60, right? So let's say that she really makes between $50 and $60. That's a lot easier to try to figure out than 51.83, okay? So let's say $50 times 7 days. Well, 5 times 7 is 35. And then I just add the 0. So now I have $350 there. Now I can use this 60 times 7, or 6 times 7 is 42. Now you have to know your number facts, right, to be able to do this quickly. 6 times 7 is 42, and then I'm going to add a 0. So that means the amount that I'm really looking at here is I'm looking at something between 350 and 420. Well, what answer choice over here is between 350 and 420? Well, this one's too small, right? This one's too small, and this one's too big. So the only one that it could possibly be is that answer choice right there. So you can see how rounding can very quickly get you to an answer instead of having to grab a calculator, try to figure this out one by one, just round it and then use that to try to help you out. So let's look at another example here real quick. Another example, let's say Ernie earns $150 from a small carpentry job. So he earned $150, okay? Now, let's say he spent $15.70 at the grocery store. He must not have bought much groceries, maybe just some milk and bread. All right, so he spent $15.70 at the grocery, but he spent $59.30, let's say, at the hardware store. Now, that sounds more like me. I'm going to spend more at the hardware store than I'm going to spend at the grocery store. But anyway, so he earned this much and he spent this much. Now, again, if I'm trying to figure out, okay, how much left over, how much does he have left over after he earned the $150 and he spent this on these different expenses? Well, again, if you try to take $15.70 from $150 and then take $59.30 from that, it's just going to get difficult. It's not going to be very easy to be able to do. So again, let's just make some answer choices real quick. Let's say A is between 40 and 50. Let's say B is between 90 and 100. C is between 50 and 60. And D is between 70 and 80. Okay, so again, let's just think about this in terms of what really makes sense. The 150 is pretty easy to understand, so that kind of makes sense. But now let's figure out something I can do with this. So I've got 1570. Well, again, the last strategy that we used a few minutes ago is just go ahead and round to the tens digit, right? Because it was just a lot easier to go ahead and do. So 1570 is almost $20. So let's go ahead and take that off. That leaves me with 130. And now this 59.30, that's really close to 60. So if I take 130 minus 60, that is going to leave me about $70. But again, I rounded this one up. I didn't actually spend that much. So I actually saved a little bit more than just the 20. So guess what? 70 right here's my answer. All of these other ones just does not seem reasonable. Okay. So again, rounding can really help you to make a decision quickly. Let's say you're in a grocery store and you got $100 and you start thinking about what all you've put into that buggy. Okay. You can start kind of rounding a little bit and kind of get an idea. Okay. Do I have enough money or am I going to be embarrassed and have to put stuff back on the conveyor? Right. So again, another thing that can help us with. So last but certainly not least, we're going to talk about some real world fractions and decimal type problems. Okay, these are the ones we hate the most, but again, it really does help us if we're doing certain tasks. So let's say Mary is baking something that requires 1 cup of sugar. 1 cup of sugar. Mary's baking something that requires 1 cup of sugar, and she only has a 3/8 cup measuring cup. Okay. So she is trying to bake. She only has a 3/8 cup measuring cup, but she knows she needs 1 cup of sugar. So she goes ahead and puts 2 of these in. So 2 measuring cups. So the question is, has she put in enough? And if not, how much more does she need to put in? Okay. So again, let's just think about this logically. If I have 3/8 of a cup, and I do that twice, it's the same thing as saying 3/8 plus 3/8, right? So 3/8 plus 3/8 equals 6/8. So in order to make a whole number, I have to have 8 out of 8 measuring cups, right? So this tells me I have not did enough yet. I've not put enough in, which then again, I've kind of answered my own question. 1 cup would be the same as 8/8. So if I take my 8/8, which is 1 cup, minus my 6/8, which is what I've put in so far, that means I still lack 2/8. But again, I could simplify that, and that would be 1/4. Okay. So Mary still needs to put 1/4 of a cup into her recipe. So you kind of see how that could be useful if you're cooking, baking home, doing something like that. Let's look at one more example, and this will be it for today. So let's say that George bought a shirt for $32.75. This was the shirt. It's an expensive shirt. I probably wouldn't pay that much for a shirt. But he bought a hat that is $20.90. That seems pretty reasonable for a hat, especially a good hat. So he gives the clerk a $100 bill. Now, you know, a $100 bill, it doesn't last long when you go shopping. So a $100 bill, how much change should you get back? Now, again, I do this all the time. When I go through the drive-through through Wendy's or McDonald's or somewhere else, if I give the person a 20, I want to make sure that I get all my change back. Okay. So I'm thinking about, okay, how much did my meal cost and how much should I be getting back? Okay. So again, just kind of thinking about this a little bit in terms of what makes sense. Again, this 32.75, maybe I could go ahead and round that to 33. Maybe this 20.90, I could just go ahead and leave it as 20 because 20 is a lot easier to try to figure out. So now that means that added together, that's $53. So if I take 53 away from 100, that's going to be $47, which kind of makes sense. 50 would be half of 100, right? So that would be half of 100. So if I really spent like 53, then that makes sense that this number should be close to 50 as well. So $47. So again, it helps us not only in real life, but it helps us in our workplace. Again, if you're working in a place where you're dealing with money, you really want to make sure that you know how to count change back and how to do all that. So again, very helpful to have some general number sense. Okay. So next week, we're going to be talking about percents. We're going to move on to percents, but I just wanted to get all of this kind of out of the way before we went into that and make sure that we know how to apply some of these problems as well. So hopefully this has been helpful, and just reach out to me or Miss Willer, either one, if you need help. Also, make sure that you're using those tools, the Desmos calculator. You can also get an app for that. And there is also study help there on Study Island as well. So make sure that you're availing yourself to all of those resources. Okay. Have a great week and hope to see you soon.